When you've been carrying for a long time, you start to notice patterns in how lawmakers treat the Second Amendment. Some months it's quiet, other months it feels like the ground shifts under your feet. And right now, we're standing on one of those fault lines. Something rolled out of Washington that isn't just another headline. It's a direct shot at the patchwork carry rules we've all had to navigate for years. Instead of 50 different interpretations of what lawful carry means, Congress just pushed a move that could flatten that mess into one national rulebook. And the part that really has folks talking isn't the bill number or the political noise around it. It's what happens when you cross a border and your rights stop depending on what state line your boots are standing on. So if you've ever driven across the country, taken a work trip, or carried on a family vacation, and felt that knot in your stomach because each state plays by its own set of rules, this update might change how you move, how you plan, and how you protect the people riding with you. All right, let's break this down. Where this thing came from, why it's exploding now, and what it could mean for every lawful carrier in America. Before we talk about the politics or the courtroom fights, we need to look at what actually changes for the folks who carry every day. Because the real story here isn't buried in legal jargon. It's in how simple things get when the rules stop shifting every time your wheels roll past a state sign. Imagine this. You've trained, you've qualified, you've got your permit squared away back home. Under this new framework, that single permit wouldn't be trapped in your home zip code anymore. It follows you coast to coast. The same way a driver's license works when you're crossing from Texas into New Mexico or from Georgia up into Tennessee. But here's the part that flips the entire system upside down. If you end up in handcuffs because some officer or agency decides to test the lines, the burden doesn't fall on you to prove innocence. The state has to make the case, and if they can't, they're the ones cutting the check for your legal bill, your damages, and whatever time they cost you. That's not a small tweak. That's a full shift in power. For the first time in a long time, lawful carriers would have a guardrail backed by federal teeth instead of hoping state politics treat them fairly. Long before lawmakers started arguing over this bill on Capitol Hill, the pressure came from real people who found out the hard way what happens when the map turns into a minefield. These weren't criminals. These weren't troublemakers. Just lawful Americans who crossed the wrong border at the wrong time. Take Shaneen Allen. Single mom, working hard, took the steps every state says they want responsible gun owners to take. Background check, training, permit, the whole package. She did everything right, until she drove into New Jersey for a kid's birthday party. One traffic stop later, she told the truth, thinking honesty mattered, and suddenly she was staring down felony charges. Same woman, same firearm, same permit. But one invisible line on a highway turned her life upside down. And she wasn't alone. Truckers, travelers, and everyday carriers like David McCoy and Jeffrey Johnson found themselves trapped in that same system. Guys just trying to do a job or make it home on time, only to discover that legal changes, meaning depending on which exit you take. These cases didn't just spark outrage, they're the reason H.R. 38 exists at all. Lawmakers didn't wake up and decide to fix the problem out of nowhere. People lived the consequences first, and their stories pushed this fight to the national level. Once those stories started circulating, the pressure didn't stay at the street level for long. The minute national attention shifted toward reciprocity, Washington turned it into a battleground. And the whole thing went from quiet policy talk to full-blown political fuel the second one name got involved: President Trump. Trump didn't tiptoe around the issue. He came out swinging with open support for H.R. 38. That backing lit a fire under House leadership, and suddenly, hearings were getting fast-tracked, committees were moving, and the bill wasn't just a conversation piece anymore. It was a priority. But the real weight behind this push wasn't just Trump's voice. It was the court he left behind. Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Barrett. Three justices who already proved in the Bruin ruling that the Second Amendment doesn't shrink just because a state government prefers control over clarity. They made it clear, rights don't evaporate when you travel. H.R. 38 is basically an extension of that idea. Same logic, same constitutional backbone. And when you've got a Supreme Court that already slapped down may-issue frameworks, Lawmakers know the wind is blowing in one direction, toward nationwide protection for lawful carriers. This wasn't just politics as usual. It was a tectonic shift backed by the Oval Office and reinforced by the highest court in the country. And everyone watching knew it. Before anyone gets wrapped up in the headlines, you've got to understand the engine under the hood. H.R. 38 isn't just a political statement. It's a structural rewrite of how concealed carry rights function once you leave your home state. Here's the clean version. Under this framework, whatever rules your home state trusted you with, follow you. Doesn't matter if you're walking along a beach in California, grabbing lunch in Manhattan, or filling up a truck in Illinois. If your state says you're good to carry, the rest of the map doesn't get to rewrite that for you. But the real power move isn't reciprocity. It's accountability. In the old system, if an officer or prosecutor decided they didn't like out-of-state carriers, you'd be the one calling lawyers and praying it didn't drain your savings. H.R. 38 flips the entire formula. If a state wrongfully slaps cuffs on a lawful permit holder, the state has to justify the arrest. And if their reasoning falls apart, they're the ones on the hook. Legal fees, damages, the whole mess. This changes the stakes. Suddenly, the states that used to gamble on pushing the limits of their own laws now have something to lose. And for the first time in decades, lawful carriers aren't stepping into unfamiliar territory blind. They've got a federal spotlight backing them up. Anytime the federal government steps in and says, "We're setting one standard for everyone," you can bet a handful of states are going to throw a fit. And right on schedule, the usual suspects lined up to say H.R. 38 is some kind of threat to state sovereignty. That's the headline version. The real reason runs a whole lot deeper. For years, permits have been a cash machine. Classes, renewals, processing fees, stack it all up, and you're talking a multi-billion-dollar stream that certain states have depended on. If reciprocity becomes nationwide, that money doesn't just shrink, it pretty much evaporates. And the states that built entire bureaucracies around that revenue, they're staring straight at a hard reset. That's why California, New York, and a few others started rattling sabers before the ink was even dry on committee votes. Lawsuits, challenges, creative interpretations, they're already brainstorming ways to drag H.R. 38 through every courtroom they can reach. But here's the part that makes their footing shaky. The Bruin precedent. The same Supreme Court that dismantled May issue wasn't subtle about it. They said the Second Amendment doesn't bend because a state legislature wants tighter reins, which means every argument these states used to lean on suddenly doesn't hold weight anymore. They can protest all they want, but if H.R. 38 clears Congress, the barriers they built over decades start cracking fast. When critics start shouting that nationwide reciprocity will spark chaos, it usually sounds scary. Until you look at the actual numbers. And the numbers tell a completely different story. One that gun control groups hope you never read. Across every major state that tracks concealed carry data, lawful permit holders consistently show up as some of the most responsible people in the system. Texas has been publishing conviction statistics for decades, and year after year, CCW holders make up a fraction of criminal cases. Numbers so low, they barely register. Florida tells the same story. Huge population, millions of permits issued, and yet the revocation rate for misuse stays microscopic. Here's the part critics can't explain away. In multiple states, concealed carry holders are statistically more law-abiding than police officers. Let that sink in. The people who carry every day, the same folks some politicians are terrified of, are already proving they can handle the responsibility. So when someone claims H.R. 38 will unleash mayhem, you know they're not talking from data. They're talking from fear or politics. Even with all the momentum behind it, H.R. 38 isn't crossing the finish line without a fight. The committee vote was just the warm-up lap. Once this bill hits the full House and then the Senate, every political machine in the country is going to throttle up. Supporters already have a strong head start. More than 180 co-sponsors isn't something you see every week in Washington. But that doesn't mean the Senate will roll over. That chamber has its own rules, its own personalities, and a long history of dragging gun legislation through the mud. And while this thing moves forward, the pressure outside the Capitol is only getting hotter. Gun control groups are pumping out fear-based headlines as fast as they can type them, trying to frame H.R. 38 as some kind of national disaster. Meanwhile, Second Amendment organizations are doing the exact opposite, sending out alerts, rallying grassroots support, and reminding lawmakers that millions of trained, vetted carriers are tired of living under 50 different rulebooks. Out on the ground, sheriffs in constitutional carry states have already weighed in. Their message? The confusion doesn't come from nationwide reciprocity. It comes from the 50-state patchwork we've been stuck with for decades. Bottom line, this next phase is going to be a political brawl, and nobody's pretending otherwise. H.R. 38 is more than a policy shift. It's a blunt test of whether your rights travel with you or vanish at a state line. If it passes, lawful carriers finally get one clear standard across the entire map. If it stalls, expect new restrictions to follow fast. Tell me what you think. Is the country ready for one carry rule, or are we in for another political choke point? Make sure you like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Stay sharp.